Every gilded cage is built with walls of comfort. The only question is what you're paying for them.
What if I told you that you could predict the future? And I don't mean with a crystal ball or tarot cards. I mean by understanding a kind of hidden code in history. Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into today. We're looking at a pretty radical theory that says the rise and fall of civilizations isn't random at all. It actually follows a predictable script. So, let's just start with a bombshell, shall we? Here's a prediction from the material we're looking at. Within a decade, America will likely start a foreign war, and then a civil war. Now, this isn't some psychic's guess. The argument is that this is a totally logical deduction. So the real question is, how on earth could anyone claim something like that? And that's the big question, right? Is history just one crazy thing after another, a total mess? Or is there some kind of underlying logic, a kind of operating system that's been running in the background this whole time? Well, let's find out. Okay, first up, history's hidden logic. The basic idea here is that every single civilization runs on a kind of foundational code. And to get a handle on where we are now, you have to go all the way back to see how that code was first written. And that code, well, it usually starts with what we'd call founding myths. For Western civilization, our story kicks off in ancient Greece, where two totally competing ideas created a conflict, a bug in the system, really, that we are still dealing with today. And here is that fundamental clash. On one hand, you've got the world of Homer, the poet. He believes that what makes us human is empathy, imagination, our ability to feel with each other. But then, you've got Socrates, the philosopher. And for him, feelings were just a distraction, something that gets in the way of the only thing that matters, pure, cold, hard reason. Now, look, this wasn't just some friendly debate. Socrates was dead set against democracy. He argued that the average person was just too ignorant, too emotional, to be trusted with any real power. And right there, from the very beginning, a fundamental bug was written into our civilizational software, a democratic system that was programmed with a deep suspicion of its own people. Okay, so we've got this flawed code. Now, let's see what happens when you actually run it on the hardware of history. It turns out that pretty much all empires, from ancient Rome to modern America, seem to follow this incredibly predictable cycle of rise and fall. And the key driver of this cycle is a concept called elite overproduction. Now, you gotta forget the idea of revolutions starting with poor people storming the castle. This theory says the real instability, it comes from the top. It happens when a society creates way too many wealthy, educated, ambitious people who are all fighting for the same very limited number of jobs at the top. That's when you get this intense, vicious infighting among the powerful, and that's what really tears a society apart. So this creates a surprisingly predictable life cycle. First, you have the rise phase, right? Society is unified, it's growing, things are looking up, but then comes decline. This is when the elites stop creating new things and start rent-seeking, which is basically just rigging the game to protect their own status and pull wealth out of the system. Society gets rigid, brittle, and then collapse. A perfect storm of crises hits, and because the system is so fragile, the whole thing just shatters, and it often happens with terrifying speed. And if you think this is all just ancient history, think again. Just look at the US national debt today, $37 trillion. According to this model, a number like that isn't just an economic data point. No, it's a giant, flashing red light. It's a symptom of a system deep in that decline phase, where the machine is just printing money to prop up a status quo that isn't working anymore. So, we've got this faulty operating system and this predictable cycle of decline. But a third, absolutely massive element entered the picture a couple thousand years ago. A revolutionary idea that completely rewrote humanity's code and basically supercharged the stakes of this whole drama. Think about it. The older world, the polytheistic one, saw history as pretty chaotic. It was governed by the whims of the gods, by fate. It just went around and around in circles. But monotheism came along and flipped the whole script. It said, no, history isn't a circle. It's a line. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's a grand story about a cosmic battle between good and evil, and it's all heading somewhere. And this idea of an end game, this grand finale, it has a name, eschatology. And it is an unbelievably powerful motivator. It gives history a purpose. And more importantly, it gives it a script. It's not just about empires rising and falling anymore. Now it's about a final world-shattering battle where everything is on the line. All right, let's put all the pieces together. We have the foundational code, the historical cycle, and this cosmic script. And now we can finally make sense of that crazy prediction we started with. It all starts with that ancient conflict from Greece, the Socratic rational elite versus the Homeric ideal of a society based on empathy and shared feeling. I mean, does that sound familiar? You can see that exact same tension playing out in our politics, in our culture, every single day. Now, this deep cultural conflict is happening inside a system that is showing all the classic signs of being in late-stage decline. You've got the elite overproduction, the rent-seeking behavior, the extreme fragility. The pressure inside the system is building and building to a breaking point. And then you pour gasoline on this whole volatile mix with eschatology. You have different groups who all believe they're the heroes in a final cosmic drama, a last battle between good and evil. And this belief doesn't just explain conflict, it actively encourages it. It pushes everything toward one final confrontation. And this brings us right back to where we started. When you combine a culture that's deeply divided against itself, a social structure that's fundamentally unstable, and powerful ideologies that are screaming for a final battle, well, that prediction of war suddenly doesn't sound so much like a wild guess anymore, does it? It starts to look like the logical conclusion of a historical pattern that is repeated for thousands of years. So, where does that leave us? If history really does follow a script, are we all just actors reading our lines from a play that's already been written? Or, and this is the big question, by understanding the pattern, by seeing the script for what it is, can we choose to write a different ending? That's the question this model really leaves us with. Thanks for joining me.